IVM.
Have you ever wondered why women don't do more crime? Well, we're here to tell you. There's misconduct all the time. Women are thieves and murderers.
That's gross misconduct.
Con artists, money launderers.
Criminal misconduct.
Financial fraud that's hard to track.
Takes some planning, but still misconduct.
Even breaching a contract.
Well, that's more civil though.
It's misconduct. Misconduct. We tell you all about women that suck. Things that make you say, what the? It's misconduct.
Hello, and welcome to Misconduct. We're a podcast about Indian women who happen to be criminals. My name is Raghavi.
And I am Nisha. And on today's episode, we talk about Durgavati Devi, an Indian freedom fighter and revolutionary who became one of the few women ever quoted in history as being part of the independence movement. Fondly known as Durga Bhavi by her fellow revolutionaries, Durga did everything from helping Bhagat Singh escape the British forces to setting up bomb assembly plants to trying to assassinate a British official. And she did it almost entirely by herself. She was, dare I say it, a badass.
You must say it because she is a badass. And like our previous episodes, this is actually going to involve a very heavy amount of fangirling. We'll keep it to a minimum as much as we can. But also, this is the kind of episode where I feel our people will be left wondering, is the stuff that she did really a crime? And the answer to that is yes, it is. Just because she did it in a manner that makes your heart sort of like swell with patriotism, that doesn't mean she was not a violent person. For its time, which was essentially during the independence freedom movement, it technically was a crime. For its time, it was a crime.
Oh.
And that rhymed. That also rhymed. It's, oh no, I'm stuck in a loop, but it's fine. Oh no.
Okay, Dormammu. Let's move on. It was cute the first time.
I'm so sorry. I didn't expect that at all.
Okay, just to clarify, people die and stuff. We will be discussing the methods and actions of some very extremist, violent revolutionaries from the Indian independence movement. There will also be mentions of death by hanging. This content is not suitable for children, so listener discretion is advised.
That's right. And for this episode, we're going to take a little bit of a format detour. Usually what we do is we give you like a buttload of context. Look, we shove it down your throat. But instead, we thought we'll just start about the early life of Durga Bhavi. And then after that, we can give you some context as to what it was like to live through, this ridiculously political, social, economic turbulence that was the Indian freedom movement.
Cool. Let's take a look at Durga Bhabi's early life. So, Durga Bhabi was born as Durgavati Devi on 7th October 1907. Hey, she's a Libra.
Why is that relevant?
I don't know. Libra women are elegant and feminine, but also have a wild side. I'm super into astrology.
Fair. That is your choice.
Okay. So she was born in Uttar Pradesh in modern day district of Kaushambi. She was the only child of a Gujarati Brahmin parents that had settled in Allahabad. Her mother died when she was young and her father vowed to never remarry. She was then brought up by her aunt. So she studied up to class 5. She was from a largely well-off family. How do we know this? Because her father gave a massive dowry when she got married. Also, when did she get married? At the ripe old age of 11.
Ew, basically just get off the market now. What is even the point?
Yep. That's what. But I guess it was
normal for its time.
Not uncommon. Yeah, back then. So Durgavati Devi was married to Bhagwati Charan Vora of Lahore. Bhagwati Charan was an Indian revolutionary. He was the son of a wealthy Gujarati family that was closely tied to the Indian railways. Bhagwati was also from a well-off family, but yet he chose the revolutionary path to rid India of the colonial rule, and surprise, surprise, his family encouraged him to. I know, which is so rare.
Yeah.
He was 15 when he married Durga. Bhagwati studied at the National College in Lahore, which is where he met Bhagat Singh. National College eventually became the recruiting ground for the revolutionary organization called Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, or the HSRA. The HSRA was a revolutionary organization started by leading freedom fighters of the time. It was established in October 1924 in Kanpur in UP. And some of its prominent members were Ram Prasad Bismil, Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, Rajguru, Ashfaqullah, Chandrasekhar Azad. And if you don't remember these names, I invite you to watch the movie Rang De Basanti. So these are the lead characters featured in that movie. They're all the top brass of HSRA. Why am I recommending this movie as a primary source? One, because it's one that I have seen. Aha. And also because I don't think a lot of people are going to pick up a book. So,
Hey, okay, I actually used Rang De Basanti as a source for this episode.
aha.
I use the word source very loosely. I just watched the movie. That's really, dude. Just before, even like I really wanted to watch the last 5 minutes of the movie, where spoiler alert for this 2006 movie that everybody has already seen, where everybody gets gunned down at the All India Radio, this thing, right? The offices. I was like, okay, I wanted to pump myself up just before this recording. So I was like, let's watch that. I'll feel so patriotic, like, oh, young people like giving up their lives for the country. But then that ending is like almost 20 minutes. Okay. That movie is like not edited super well, I feel. So then I gave up and instead I watched the last 5 minutes of the India versus Australia match from Chak De India.
Oh my God. The 70 minute.
So, yeah, dude. Like that was like, fine. I can do that 5 minutes. I know what's going to happen. It's not that stressful. And now I feel super patriotic for this episode. So
Awesome. So what was the HSRA all about? So the HSRA was born as a response to the primarily non-violent non-cooperation movement of 1920, led by Mahatma Gandhi. The non-cooperation movement was suspended by Gandhi after the Chauri Chaura incident. Basically, a group of originally peaceful Indian protesters set fire to a police station, resulting in the death of about 25 civilians and policemen. So the suspension of the movement disillusioned a lot of the younger revolutionaries who saw that, violence is collateral damage, something that is necessary for freedom fighters to make a real impact. And many also thought that the violence at Chauri Chaura was not like so bad to suspend an entire nationwide movement that had gained so much momentum after years of just like smaller failed attempts securing the British Empire's attention. And the HSRA is essentially a meeting of the minds of the revolutionaries, and they truly believed in this.
By the way, Gandhi really did not like any of these folks. And it's not that he really hated them or anything. I mean, Gandhi's ideology just was a little different. Very different, starkly different, of course. And I wouldn't say that he hated them per se, but there was a certain degree of like publicly visible disdain that he put out about the HSRA and its people. We'll talk about that more as we go through events chronologically. You'll sort of understand where we are coming from with that. And also, it's one more thing. We've really simplified a lot of what we are saying here. It's really not this simple. Like, way too much happened. There are way too many important personalities. And it's just, we cannot do justice to all of that, though, because this podcast is about the woman.
Yeah.
But it's also really hard to only talk about Durga Bhabhi because a lot of what she did is really driven by the philosophy of the HSRA. So we can't really completely alienate her from the organization either. So what I'm saying is there's some more context we have to throw at you. I'm sorry. So just bear with us for another
deal with it.
Yes, I was going to say bear with it. She said deal with it. That's our personality is very crisply put out there. So yeah, essentially, when we look at the HSRA, they had a manifesto called the Philosophy of the Bomb. And yes, I said bomb, like kaput. So it was written, the Philosophy of the Bomb, which is their manifesto, was written by Durga Bhabhi's husband, Bhagwati. And the manifesto essentially calls for the youth of India to like stand up for their freedom, even if it means a potential violent end. It also talks about how the HSRA's methods are actually quite complementary to Gandhi's non-violent ones. And they sort of say that both methods are like essential to exist independently because they contribute to very different things in the freedom struggle. But also, more importantly, the manifesto was written in response to Gandhi's piece titled The Cult of the Bomb, where he sort of very viciously takes down the agenda of the HSRA. But I think one thing that will really help you guys in understanding what this manifesto is about is just literally the last para of the manifesto. I'm just going to read that out. There is no crime that Britain has not committed in India. Deliberate misrule has reduced us to paupers, has bled us white. As a race and a people, we stand dishonored and outraged. Do people still expect us to forget and to forgive? We shall have our revenge, a people's righteous revenge on the tyrant. Let cowards fall back and cringe for compromise and peace. We ask not for mercy and we give no quarter. Ours is a war to the end, to victory or death.
Oof, that's quite heavy. I often when I listen to all of these poetry slams and things like that, there are some people who just stick out because when you hear them, it sounds like they're bleeding onto paper.
Yeah.
This is one of those things.
I get it. I just literally watched Chak De India, so I'm really feeling this right now. Australia, suck it.
But it was the
I know. Listen, let's just go with it.
But I do agree on one thing though about Gandhi just kind of sticking to his principle and saying that his principle and what he always said was non-violence, right? So I understand why he hates them, or not hate or whatever, dislikes them, because listen to the manifesto. It's a clear call to violently overthrow the British Raj, which is not what he was about.
Yeah, that's fair. But I mean, that is at the root of it is differences in ideologies, right? And that happens in movements like this. You mentioned earlier, there was a lot of disillusion within the members of the HSRA, which is why they created the organization in the first place. It is also this huge generational gap.
True.
Yeah, I mean, including, there are so many things at play here. There's religion, there's caste, there's access to education, there's affluence, there's loads of stuff here. So, but the biggest thing that I feel between Gandhi and the younger, more bloodthirsty-esque folks of the HSRA is just really that generation gap. So when I read this manifesto, it really just feels like the HSRA is telling Gandhi, okay, boomer. They're just you don't know me, you're not my dad. That's really where it's going.
Awesome. On that note, let's take a break. And when we come back, we talk about Durga Bhabhi and what she did.
If you're a cricket fan, check out Edges and Sledges, India's favorite cricket podcast.
The podcast focuses on Indian cricket, the IPL, and has a ton of banter both on and off the field.
We talk about the week's biggest cricket stories with current and ex-international cricketers, coaches, or sometimes just between us.
And it's hosted by me, DJ.
Me, Varun.
And me, Ashwin.
New episodes release every week.
You can catch us on the IVM Podcasts website, app,
or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast.
So let's sort of get into how Durga Bhabhi and the HSRA are kind of related. She started off as a runner for them, kind of, in 1928. First off, she had a lot of money from her dowry, and her father-in-law, who was very fond of her, gave her a sizable amount of cash as well. And this is so wholesome. I wish we knew how much it was so that we can estimate how valuable her contribution was. Right. But it's said that they used this money to start funding the HSRA. All organizations need cash, and except for a few, most of the revolutionaries in HSRA were young, educated men from middle-class families or farming backgrounds. But unlike other organizations, the money didn't go towards salary or administrative cost or something like that. It went towards guns, ammunition, and parts for putting together bombs. So initially, Durga was charged with purchasing arms and ammunitions for the revolutionary. But because she was a woman, the police did not suspect her, did not suspect that she was actively involved in freedom movement. I assume some British dude was like, oh, she just wants servitude, as all women do. And then Durga Bhabhi was like, aha, loophole.
Aha, loophole. Good for her, man. I mean, I personally believe if you can trick the patriarchy in your favor, you must.
Yes. Game the system.
There is no other way to game the system. Anything else you say is already... I mean, it's a time when I think in the US, women would have just gotten the right to vote. Just now. Yeah, in the 20s, literally right now. So it's one of those. And we as a country didn't even have our own country technically yet.
We didn't even have a country.
Yeah, so she had a loophole. She exploited it. Good for her.
Good for her. And actually, even though she was she was the HSRA founder's wife, very few other women were actively politically involved. So yes, I know this was the time where Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi or Uda Devi of Lucknow took up arms and fought for themselves. But that was in the 1850s. In the 1920s, there was Sarojini Naidu and Umabhai Kundapur, folks who were largely either offering shelter or penning non-violent political pieces to inspire people. So Durga Bhabhi was already an anomaly, and so the police and the Brits just never suspected her. And she spent the better part of her year secretly delivering arms and ammunition to the HSRA, all by herself. She was the OG Dunzo.
Good for her, man.
She also had a side hustle, by the way. She worked at the Girls' College in Lahore between 1925 to 1929. In 1929, however, she quit because she had to go into hiding.
Right. Oh, by the way, she was referred to as Bhabhi essentially out of respect. Most of you would know Bhabhi means the wife of your older brother. But in a more colloquial way, it just is some respect that you show usually to a woman that's older than you, or just to be like, hey, I respect you. So the other members of the HSRA saw her almost as a mother figure, even though she essentially was the same age as them. She wasn't particularly older or anything. So yeah, it's basically just a term of respect at the end of the day.
I guess. And it also happens, right? When women are involved in these kind of situations, you get branded as one of these relationships, like mother, sister, whatever. But you're not a woman by yourself. But I feel like there are some, leading figures who have kind of rebranded themselves and use that as a personal identifier. Like our own, Jayalalitha going as Amma, or even Mamta Banerjee going as Didi. And these things really help their image and build on whatever respect that they need from people.
That's true. Actually, across a lot of the resources that we read for this episode, she primarily is referred to as Durga Bhabhi. That's the name that really stuck, But of course, also, let's not forget that by this point, she's really not all that old. She might be about 20 to 21 years old at best, if I just do some really quick maths, which is also likely to be bad maths. But yeah, she was doing all this arms smuggling and ammunition delivery at the age of 20, 21, which is just nuts.
Crazy.
That's just absolutely nuts. But yeah, so essentially in 1929, a little after she sort of started doing, the dunzo work, so to speak, things sort of took a bloody turn in the sense that Durga sort of got really more personally attached to this kind of work. And the kind of work she would do would also kind of really escalate at this point. So in 1929, she traveled to Calcutta with her husband and Bhagat Singh and a bunch of other revolutionaries. And she attended the Congress session that was taking place in the city. But she was under disguise, is what we're given to understand. And it was during this trip that Bhagat Singh apparently learned to make bombs for the first time. And homemade bombs in particular would feature very, very heavily in the HSRA's methods. So it is said that Durga was heavily influenced by the determination of her fellow comrades during this trip. And bomb making in particular was something that she was really interested in. Later in 1929, Durga's husband would rent a room in Lahore. It's room number 69 at the Kashmir building. So this room essentially becomes a bomb factory. And a lot of bombings were planned here, and bombs were put together in that room. And this includes the planning for the December 1929 bomb blast that was supposed to kill the Viceroy Lord Irwin was also from this room. So Durga is a big part of this by this point. And she, because she still, she still was a woman, she would continue to procure the material for these bombs while also learning how to make them. And we actually have the editor of the Hindustan Times from that time, which is J.N. Saini. He said sometime in the early 1930s that he has seen Durga Bhabhi in a secret meeting in Delhi. And she was apparently sourcing pistols and she had kept them concealed under her clothes. So we have an eyewitness, to this. It's not as simple as she may have done this. How cool. There are people who saw her literally dealing arms in the middle of Delhi, man. Delhi was the capital of, the British Empire in India by then. So to so brazenly do it out there, I mean, again, we're condemning all of this. Don't make bombs.
or keep concealed weapons.
Don't do any of these things, just in general.
Yes. Now, there is one major event that we need to know about before we can proceed, and that is the Saunders Killing. So, on 17th November 1928, freedom fighter Lala Lajpat Rai was beaten to death in a lathi charge at a protest by a British officer named James Scott. Bhagat Singh and his associate, Shivram Rajguru, wanted to avenge Lala's death. So on 17th December 1928 in Lahore, the duo shot at a police officer that they believed to be James Scott. The police officer's name was John Saunders, and he died when he was shot. And I feel like I've seen this in some movie.
Yeah, you might have, because in the early 2000s, Bollywood made like 200 movies about Bhagat Singh. There were so many, dude. And if you ask which Bollywood actors played Bhagat Singh, the answer is yes. So many movies. It's not even funny. Like, I think there were, 200 is obviously, I'm extrapolating, whatever. But like, I think there are at least about 4 or 5 movies from what I remember.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of those movies.
One of those, yes.
Now, Bhagat Singh and Rajguru were on the run. They escaped from the scene of the crime and fled to their safety house. But the police knew the location of their safe houses and had them kind of blocked. They were feeling trapped. On 19th December 1928, Sukhdev called upon Durga Bhabhi to shelter the two men and himself. At that time, Lahore was under a lockdown. Man, I get it. And Durga's husband had just left for Calcutta. So she was home alone with her son, her 3-year-old son, Sachindra. So Durga and the boys.
Durga and the boys mixtape out this weekend.
Pew, pew, pew. Excuse my terrible air horn.
Yes, sorry, Durga and the boys. Go on.
Yes, so Durga and the boys, they figured out a plan to get them to escape Lahore. They would catch the train departing from Lahore to Bhatinda en route to Calcutta early in the next morning. So Bhagat Singh and Durga would pose as a young couple with a child. Rajguru would be their quote-unquote servant carrying their luggage. Durga's husband had also given her a ton of money, like I think around like 5,000 rupees. And she put part of this towards making this mission a success.
And a success it was, because they not only made it to Calcutta in one piece, they also managed to just evade the police throughout, like from the beginning. And particularly at the Lahore railway station, because on that day, it is said that there were 400 policemen that were stationed specifically on a lookout for these people. Like Nisha said earlier, Lahore was under lockdown. So the entire police force was like, where are these dudes? We need to find them. By the way, Durga's husband, who was in Calcutta at this time, he had no idea any of this was happening. So on the train journey, when they had stopped at Lucknow, Bhagat Singh had sent a telegram to Durga's husband, Bhagwati, saying that he was traveling with Durgavati. And Bhagwati apparently was super confused. Okay, he was like, who is Durgavati? Like, it's your wife, man. Like, he just, I don't know if that was like, added for dramatic effect, or he really genuinely, I don't know, hit his head somewhere. But apparently he was really confused about who this Durgavati was. And when the party arrived in Calcutta, he was like, what? It's my wife, Durgavati? What?
Hey.
And apparently when he met her, he was really happy to see her, and he called her a revolutionary wife.
Of course.
Yeah. Not just a revolutionary person.
Fair.
But would you call Bhagat Singh like a revolutionary brother to whoever Bhagat Singh's brother could have been? I don't know. You wouldn't do that, right? You wouldn't put that additional tag.
That's true. Also, I should just add that I said chumma, and that means just like that in Tamil, not like
just
saying.
Like in South India, chumma is like Amy. That's usually
that's the word I'm looking for.
But like yes, we understand it's not the same. You should know more about South Indian languages by now. I'm really sorry.
Yes.
In any case, in 1930, Durgavati's husband dies. So so Bhagwati was in Lahore on 28th May 1930 when he was testing a bomb on the banks of the river Ravi, and it just accidentally exploded. So remember again, these are really young people. He was 26 at the time of his death. And Durga would have been 23-ish when she was widowed. Yet they were married for almost 12 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because she was married at 11 and he was 15, right? So,
Forgot about the child marriage.
of course, yes. But eventually he was buried in a shallow grave along the river, and Durga just never saw his body, that's quite sad.
It is.
But did you think Durga would stop her shenanigans? No, of course
Maybe.
not. No, shut up. Of course not. She's just at a place where she's like, I'm doing this for my country, you know? Like she's just really there. There's this book that we read for this, the research for this particular episode. It's called A Revolutionary History of Interwar India, Violence, Image, Voice and Text. It's written by Kama MacLean. And there are sizable chunks that are devoted to Durgavati. And one of the things that it says about her after her husband died is that she sort of just met widowhood with a very quiet sort of a dignity. There is also like Kama, the author, claims that there was an interview with Durga that she's uncovered, in which Durga sums up her activities after her husband dies. So this is what Durga says, what she did after her husband died. And I quote, I fled after that. That being, once her husband passed away. I fled after that. I sent the boy to someone in Allahabad. There was a warrant against me, so I threw myself fully into my work. I was not a born revolutionary, but one who becomes a revolutionary with the maturity of ideas. More and more, an individual thinks, understands, reads, and writes. His ideas change. They become stronger. It's not about being emotional. The first phase is emotional. And I believe that 99% of our comrades were those who had come from an emotional phase, educated themselves, and then became genuine revolutionaries. Of course, there are exceptions, such as my husband, such as Chandrasekhar Azad. I told Azad I wanted my full share of revolutionary work. Yeah, girls deep in it. Yeah, she is deep into it.
Yeah, I think with every line, you can see how her resolve just grows stronger and stronger and stronger.
Right.
And then at the end, she's just like, I'm going to do all of my work.
Yeah.
Like whatever you assign to the boys, I'm going to do
one of the boys. That's what she is. No, good for her. I mean, like it's, you don't see this sort of resolve a lot, even with women today, and I don't mean that from a place of like judgment. We all have different experiences growing up, and through our adult lives as well, that put us in different circumstances. And I totally understand that. And of course, not everyone processes grief and like loss in the same way. But Durga madam was like, nah, I'm gonna really like mess things up now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in general, it's just really hard to break the glass ceiling. And she's just like shattering it.
She shot at it with a gun.
Hey. Okay, so what does she do next? On 8th October 1930. Oh, hey, that's the day after her birthday. Sorry. On 8th October 1930, Durga shot at a European couple standing outside the Lamington Road police station in Bombay. Sorry, this was just quite jarring. Anyway, but the victims were a police sergeant named Mr. Taylor and his wife. Both of them survived. So the shots were fired from a car.
When we laughed earlier, it wasn't super jarring because they survived, guys.
So the shots were fired from a car, and the witnesses say at least 3 people were in the car. The Times of India reported the incident as the first outrage of its kind in Bombay in recent years, and is reminiscent of the anarchist outrages of Bengal. Just Times of India being extra. But anyway, so when the police investigated it, the driver of the car was found and he confessed that one of the assailants was a Gujarati woman disguised in male attire who went by the name Sharda Devi. The driver also mentioned that she was young, fair and good looking. And a day prior to the shooting, the death sentence was awarded to Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev and Rajguru for their actions in the Lahore conspiracy.
Oh, damn. Yeah, all of this, dude, like her husband's died. All of this has happened around her birthday and her friends are just like, the boys are just gone. Like out of her life. She must have been devastated. I can't even imagine the grief.
It turns out that Durga's husband actually had taught her how to use a gun. So when the HSRA needed a hand with revenge, she volunteered. So she basically, the way she processes grief is, I'm going to go shoot British people. So it was also said that she originally wanted to shoot Lord Haley, the ex-governor of Punjab, but then they found out that the security was too tight around the house. So she was annoyed by this, and then she went to a police station instead, and she saw a random white couple there, and she just shot at them.
That's terrible.
I mean, it is terrible.
That's so
it's
terrible.
a little childish, but I mean, she was 23 and like hot blood running through her veins.
Of course, yeah.
It took days for the police to come to this conclusion, though, that the woman was Durga, and by that time she had just escaped.
She did do that. And on this note, we will take a teeny tiny break. When we come back, did she get caught? Yeah, she did. But we'll tell you more about it. So see you after the break.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On a show about crypto, Rohan Joshi is joined by Ashish Singhal of CoinSwitch Kuber as they break down the blockchain. Marathi Kirkiton, our latest show, is all about Marathi culture, tradition, literature, cuisine, and more. To make your rainy day better, hear from Manik and Dr. Rajiv Deshmukh sharing their beautiful moments in this first episode. On Cyrus Says, Lakshmi joins us to talk about Splainer.in and the Press Decode podcast. On Press Decode, a discussion over sports and mental health, keeping in mind everything that's been going on recently. On Kelniti, check out the preview of the first test match. And on Shunya One, find out why Intuit India is amongst the best places to work. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any other show for that matter, please do tell a friend. Word of mouth is the best way to spread the word about a podcast you love. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Seat, Cred, Global Victoria, Bank of Baroda, Intuit India, and CoinSwitch Kuber.
Welcome back, everyone. We're sort of going to get into what happened to Durga after she shot two white people that she just was like, hey, yeah, I can't shoot the one I originally want. These two I want to kick them instead. So after that shooting in Bombay, there was sort of like a weird shift from the perspective of like police officers, especially. The British really had to start acknowledging her now, because it come to a point where she was no longer just this mild annoyance or someone who was just around to like smuggle stuff, to the rest of the HSRA. She's getting out there and killing people, trying to kill people. So there's this book, which I have not read. I'm not able to find a copy of this, but I did find an excerpt. It's by S.T. Hollins, who is an Inspector General with the British Police. The book is called No 10 Commandments. It talks about how Durga had become essentially an eyesore for the British government in India. She was referred to as the Agni of India, like the fire of India, essentially. Honestly, the Brits had no idea what the hell to do with her. Because, like, at that point, British intelligence networks, they were just sort of really struggling to understand why women in India were joining the revolutionary movement at all. They didn't know how to look for them. They didn't know how to even start a trail on them, Like, it was just, like, she just was like, let me use this to my advantage. I want to bamboozle the hell out of them. And it worked. They were genuinely bamboozled. They had no clue how to deal with women that were actively taking part in violent measures as part of the independence movement.
Right.
And the police looked for her quite a bit, but it was a very unorganized process. She wasn't as recognizable to a lot of people as well, because her face wasn't out there similar to how Bhagat Singh's was and stuff. So the police looked for her for a very, very long time. But she was eventually arrested on 14 September 1932. She was given 3 years imprisonment for this attack. Thankfully, it didn't end in death. So it wasn't a particularly long sentence. And she was effectively only in jail for about 2 months after she got sentenced, because most likely she would have already served quite some time during her trial. And when she was released, her movements were restricted to Lahore for another 12 months. There was a law at the time which allowed for preventive detention of suspects by the British. So that's what she did. Like, she was just around Lahore for 12 months after that.
So what happened after she got out of jail? By 1931, many of the HSRA's main leaders were either dead or in jail. Chandrasekhar Azad shot himself during a gunfight. Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, and Rajguru were hanged. There were no leaders left and no coordination. Durga, in particular, was affected by Bhagat Singh and the boys' sentence. It is said that to rescue them while under trial, Durga sold her ornaments to the tune of about 3,000 rupees. She started the Bhagat Singh Defense Committee to put together funds and get some legal support for them. Apparently, she even wrote to Gandhi, like begging him to step in and save them. But all of that was in vain. Eventually, Durga graciously acknowledged that the HSRA was just dying a slow death.
And that must have been rough to sort of see you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Just to see it just come to this
is the
halt.
acceptance part of the Grief.
The grief.
Yeah, dealing with grief.
Aha. That's good for her. I mean, look, there's nothing here to say that we can say is good, in the sense that it's not like any of her actions would not be crimes, right? It's
Yeah.
she smuggled arms, she put together bombs, she
shot at people.
She smuggled fugitives, out of a city. She was kind of really out there with her nonsense, and none of this stuff. Yes, when we throw the rosy lens of it being something that she did primarily for the freedom struggle. Yes, it's so easy to romanticize it, and I understand that. I want to romanticize it, and to be honest, we have been doing that this entire episode because it's just like I said, when India won that hockey match against Australia, since the moment I saw that scene, I've been really pumped up about this episode. But essentially what I'm trying to say is it's not, I can't completely fault her for it. I understand where she was coming from, but what she did effectively put a lot of people in harm's way. And that is, it is what it is. In 1935, Durga left Lahore. She moved to Lucknow with her son, Sachindra. She was kind of vaguely active in the political scene, but in a very minor way. So in 1937 and 38, she sort of served for a while as the president of the Delhi Congress Committee. In 1938, she also got into a bit of trouble. She ended up instigating a bandh. Yeah. And she was just jailed. She was jailed for a week. So it's not like her rebel streak didn't really leave her. Still there, sort of like bubbling under the surface, but she didn't have the sort of organized support that she would have gotten if the HSRA was still around. And then after that point, I think she sort of really resigned to the fact that she's no longer going to be that sort of a revolutionary. In 1939, she undertook Montessori training in Madras. Yeah, and then she moved back to Lucknow and she started a school for poor children. And she just spent the rest of her later years in Ghaziabad. And she eventually passed away just recently. Well, not recently, but like 15th October 1999, which is quite recently in my brain. She was 92 at the time, and she passed away in Ghaziabad, where she lived the last of her years.
She died like a week after turning 92.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
really bringing this back.
Why are you so obsessed with her birthday, man?
Because can't you see like how many of these things, like important things, happen around her birthday? It's kind of weird. I guess for all of the boisterous, rebellious life that she had, towards the end, it just sounds like a nice, long, fulfilling life. I don't know.
I guess so, but there is something about this that really irked me, right? Which is the fact that we have seen a lot of freedom fighters move on, as in the ones that survived at least. They moved on to become major political powers. Many of them still holding that power within their families today within India. They're very simple examples. Nehru became the first prime minister. Rajendra Prasad became the first president. Ambedkar went on to draft the constitution. There are so many freedom fighters that became members of parliament. And, sure, many of them went back to their states and, started like grassroots sort of regional parties and everything, but they all had a career to fall back to. Almost all of them, political, as lawyers, those sorts of things. But Durga just went on to live a life of like relative obscurity almost. And the thing is, it's really unclear whether she really gave up any recognition to live a quiet life, or whether she was just sort of ousted from any position of political power because she was on the more violent, extremist, revolutionary side of all of this. And the thing is, and this is not, again, very generalized, but the fact is, the faction that went on to occupy any sort of political power in India, they largely came from those folks that Mahatma Gandhi would have considered acceptable in his eyes. And Durga would have never been acceptable in his eyes.
Yeah.
It's impossible. Like, he outrightly recognized Durga and her comrades as part of the cult of the bomb, right? Like, it's just... So something I guess we'll never really know unless she spoke about it to somebody and we have that first-hand witness. I don't know. What we'll never know is if she was intentionally denied any sort of support after the HSRA disbanded. But the thing is, if the intention was to actually sideline her, then that's really shameful on like our older male leaders of the time, because they effectively denied her that recognition for what she did, you know?
Yeah, and she also received very little recognition later on as well.
Mhm.
And when Rang De Basanti came out
Mhm.
in 2006, she was represented in a very small role played by Soha Ali Khan.
Right.
And it wasn't even like a real representation. It was like, she's also there.
Yeah.
I feel like it would have been so much more interesting to learn about, learn more about how she effectively bamboozled the British, as you said.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't even know what to do with her. And she found these, beautiful loopholes in the patriarchy, in the way they call her, and she just exploited them for the benefit of India, I guess. I mean, at least that's what it was in her mind. There's very little to really mark what Durga did. Like today, her school in Lucknow lies in utter ruin. There are no pages in the newspaper for her, no movies made about her, very few books talk about her. In Lahore, Lucknow, and Ghaziabad, there are no roads named after her. There are no memorials in her honor. We don't celebrate her birthday. I feel like I have mentioned it more times than anyone else. We don't mourn the day of her death. We don't even mention her in our history books. So I guess that's what you get for being a female revolutionary.
So, musical recap then?
Sure, let's do it.
Stay on guard, break the law. We let them know that this is war. Build the bonds, don't get caught. We don't stop for peace anymore. 'Cause I'm dreaming of freedom. Make them pay for what's right. Free to live my own life. And I'll fight for my freedom. Fight every day and every night. You just call me wife.
Girl, that was marvelous as always. But you know something, this is every time I go back to listen to our episodes, and like obviously the song comes on in the end, it's so hard for me to internalize how serious these songs are. Like they talk about like murder and like, like it's just really heavy, because that ridiculously happy ukulele is playing in the background. Okay. Like play one minor chord. I don't know.
Are you kidding? I play even the minor chords are like la. So I don't know what to do, but I don't know. I feel like it gives me a cool Bo Burnham vibe. I mean, not that cool, but hey,
I get
at
it.
least that's
I
what
remember,
I pray to a picture of Bo Burnham and then start writing.
No, I remember when you were practicing with the uke when I first got it for you. Oh, I got the uke for Nisha first, which is when we were like, should we put her in the podcast? But when I first got the ukulele for her, she's obviously she practiced Wonderwall by Oasis first, because
it was like the first song,
because she's so basic and the chords are so basic. But then later on she learned how to play what's that Death Cab for Cutie song?
I Will Follow You Into the Dark.
I'll follow you into the dark. And that song is basically like I will die with you, is what that song is. And
So
she's like,
happy.
and she's so happy about it when she's playing the uke, like la la. It was so jarring. But that's essentially how it feels when I listen to these songs. When I go back and listen to them, I'm just like, we should switch to another
good
instrument.
No, I want to leave people feeling very confused that, hey, this is so catchy and addictive. I'm singing about murder and death. Oh no.
That's true. And on that note, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. We really hope you enjoyed it.
And you can get all of our information on our website, or you can follow us on Instagram. You can catch me at @justnishfulthinking. And where can they get you, Raghavi?
I am ragi.dosai. Yes, please find us on Instagram. Please follow us for, we put out reels now because we're those kinds of people.
Yay.
We put out reels for the podcast. So we hope you enjoy it. We'll also do things like quizzes and stuff. So it'll be really fun if you guys can pitch in for that. And yes, please look up our sources and please tune in next week as well.
And this has been Misconduct. Bye.
See ya.
Do you wonder why China does the things that it does? Or want to know how we could improve online privacy? Or perhaps you're thinking about how we can kickstart India's economy. If you'd like to search for the answers to such questions, check out All Things Policy, a daily public policy podcast that covers everything from employment figures to aircraft carriers. Tune in from Monday to Friday for new episodes and fresh takes.
From uncensored and unfiltered chats with the who's who of the entertainment industry, I, Siddharth Kannan, bring your very heartcake chat show called Candid Kannan. Tune in every Friday on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts.